Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, is my good friend, wearing his toboggan still, Matt. Matt, what's going on, man?
Mark, it's still cold here in central Kentucky. We're not into the summer heat wave, and I'm not complaining about it, I got to say.
Yeah, is this like what they call, is it like blackberry winter or blueberry winter or some kind of one of those strange Kentucky winters that we have? We got like three different types of, you don't know what I'm talking about, do you, Matt?
I'm not a native.
I do.
I'm not a lifelong Kentuckian like you, Mark. Sorry.
So neither is our guest, but she knows, Matt. So
put me on the spot there.
Oh, there you go. All right. Well, we got a great show, so we'll jump right into it. But first, I want to thank our sponsor, the Stave Restaurant, out there in Millville, Kentucky, putting out some great food. We really appreciate their sponsorship. Kyle Klatka, the chef out there, is doing a great job. So stop by and see them. Check them out online as well, thestavekentucky.com. And then also 3 Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their sponsorship as well and appreciate the products that they're putting out. Ari Sussman, their master blender, doing a great job up there. So we really appreciate it. And if you've not checked out the episode, actually, we've had the Stave on our show twice now. So you can check them out. And then we also had Ari and Neil Gerard, I can never say his name, Matt Giraldo, on the show last year. So you can check out that episode as well. Matt, we do have one Barrel Society member, Brianne Howe. So happy birthday to Brianne.
Hey, happy birthday.
And look at that, man. Yeah, I got that wrapped up pretty quick, Matt, so we can tell everybody who we've got with us tonight.
That's good because we've got a real humdinger coming at you all this evening.
Humdinger.
So joining us, we have the Director of Innovation and Master of Maturation, and also the Education and Drinks Program Manager from Maker's Mark, Jane Bowie and Amanda Humphrey. Ladies, welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thanks for having us, guys. And how am I supposed to follow that title for a start?
I'm sitting here, Amanda, thinking, how am I going to put all this on social media with the titles for both of you all? This is going to be kind of like, I'm going to have to do condensed versions or something,
Acronyms.
Oh, man. So, I usually like to tell people if I know our guest, then I usually like to tell people how I know our guest. And I actually had the pleasure of meeting both Amanda and Jane. Man, it was, I guess it was over 2 years ago, if I remember correctly. I think it was maybe in April of 2019, I think. That was here in Lexington, and that was at OBC Kitchen. Makers had an event over there. It was a dinner. It was a lot of fun, and I was fortunate enough to get to sit at the table with Amanda, and we had a great time. She was just a hoot. We had a really good time, and she was kind enough. She actually bought a bottle for my wife and I that night, which I still have, Amanda. I've kept that bottle, and Jane was kind enough to sign it with Denny. So I still have it. I did open it finally.
Good on that one, because you did have a bottle of cask strength signed by Denny, and I remember the deal was that you would go home and crack that open and then keep the one that I gave you.
That's exactly right. I did. I cracked the cask strength and I've knocked it out already.
And I was living in the UK at the time, so I'm living in Kentucky now with you guys, which is awesome. That's
right. Yeah, that's really cool. I'm happy you're over here. So that's how I kind of know, not that well, but I definitely know. I know him. We've met, so it's really fun when you know your guest. You get to have them on your podcast. So with that said, let's kind of jump into what we're drinking on this first round, because we got 3 different things we're going to drink. Jane, I'll kind of throw this one over to you if you don't care to kind of fill us in on what we got on this first round.
Yeah, so we're drinking all wood finishing tonight, and we're going to start with our first ever limited release in 2019. The Stave was called RC6. I'm going to preface this with, we are really shit at naming things. Marcy Samuels was really good in 1958. We've all been terrible ever since. I blame Bill Jr. with Maker's 46. But so yeah, this was, we kicked off the series in 2019, we've been doing this wood innovation for over a decade, learning a lot. I mean, our minds were just blown when we started down the rabbit hole of oak and where it grows, how old it is, how tight the grain is, how you season it, where you season it, how you cook it, what you do. All of those are flavor levers. And as we started going down this rabbit hole for Maker's Private Select and just learning, we thought, why are we not bringing people along on this journey? So this whiskey, we created this series to really celebrate some of the choices that Bill and Margie made in the 1950s and to create expressions of Maker's Mark that were a little more polarizing and had a stronger point of view than maybe what you'd seen from us before. And so each expression has been inspired by a really specific part of our process that contributes a lot of taste and flavor. So 2019 kicked us off and we wanted to celebrate our yeast strain. We still propagate our yeast every day at Maker's Mark from the jug. 2 people do that job full time.
Wow.
We are not either of those people. They would never let us be in charge of the yeast. And if you've ever drunk our yeast, it kind of drinks like a Hefeweizen. It's a lot of fruit. You get some clove notes underlying. And so we wanted to create a brighter, more fruit-forward, expressive, slightly spicy expression of Maker's Mark to really celebrate the fact that we still do that every day. Yeah. And so that's going to kick us off.
And this is the RC6. And this is that for the stave? Is that where the name comes from? Or
yes. Okay. Basically, if you could come up, everyone listening, if you could come up with a better naming convention, it's not Willy Wonka. We will not give you our distillery, but we will send you a care package or something. But yeah, so actually, I don't know if you guys know Andrew Webrink or anyone over at Independent Stave Company. We do all our work with them. We were wearing them out in Missouri and California. So they set up their whiskey innovation lab 15 minutes down the road from us. And it's called Kentucky Research Center. And so this was the first project they ever did. So this stave was just KYRC6. I mean, it's really sad when I say it out loud. But so we just shortened it to RC6. And this was the first project they ever did out of that lab. And when we went in, we said, we want to make a brighter, fruitier whiskey using wood. And they laughed at us. And we're like, get out of here. Can't do that. Because those, the fruit and those flavors we were going for are more yeast and distillery driven. So this one was about 19 months of a lot of screwing it up. We made some really terrible whiskeys in the process of this one.
All right. Yeah. So that's really cool. And I mean, other than the name being a little, different.
Terrible.
So now this is the regular, what we'd call normal Maker's Mark. I mean,
classic.
It's your classic mash bill. And the age on this one, what's that? What are we looking at? Around 6, 7, something, maybe some.
So, I mean, everything we do starts as that Maker's Cask Strength, Mark, that we were talking about that you seem to consume copious amounts of. And everything starts as that. Our fully matured Makers is around 6 years old. It's our windows anywhere from 5.5 to 7.5 years, typically. And then this particular finishing was about 8.5 weeks. So It's slightly shorter than our 46, but yeah, it was an 8.5 week finishing.
I gotcha. Matt, what are you picking up on this one then?
Well, I'm going to start off here, Jane, by saying I'm glad we touched on the naming process here, because I didn't know if I was drinking Maker's Mark or looking at a Mazda vehicle here with the RC6 title.
Oh,
we like to keep you on your toes, Matt.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But it's interesting for you to say that this one was about the yeast strain and trying to bring in more fruit and more vibrance, and because that's what I didn't actually know, that the RC6 was about that. And the first things that I picked up on the nose were, it's got a very bright nose. I picked up a lot of tangerine, picked up some zest, also something a little sweet, little smoky, like a toasted marshmallow with it as well. and some of the oak coming across. But the tangerine for me really, really stood out in the bright, crisp, and zestiness on the nose.
So mission accomplished.
Mm-hmm.
Easy and a good way to say that. So Amanda, what about you? What do you pick up on this? We'll throw you in the mix here.
It's so bright. So I just get just to the side of my cheeks, just to the side of my palate, just that like heavy sort of baking spice and fruit note that comes through just to the side. It's absolutely delicious. It's one of my favorites, this one.
Yeah, and actually, I
the
think
wood finishing series for sure.
Yeah, you had this sent to me. I got the little bottle, but I was very appreciative because I think this was actually before it even came out. You'd actually got that little sample bottle, and then I wasn't. Believe it or not, it just when it hit the shelves here, it was so fast that I was not able to grab a bottle of it. So I'm going to have to remedy that situation at some point. But I held on to my little bottle that you guys sent to me, so I appreciate that. I'm glad. I'm glad we
just go back for bird sips now and again. Like, I'll have to get you another bottle.
There you go. So let's talk a little bit now. We kind of talked about what we're drinking here. Let's talk about you guys and how each of you got into the industry, what it is that you do currently with Makers. But can you share with us, Jane? I'll let you start, and if you want to talk a little bit about how you got into the industry, that'd be great.
Dumb luck and the bravado of a 24-year-old girl, I guess. I actually wrote a letter to Rob and Bill Samuels. I graduated college in Lexington, so I was a transy girl. Got out of school, and the goal was travel and make money and don't get a job till you're 30. Like, that was the ambition. And I was home sleeping on my mom's couch in Louisville, and I woke up one morning literally with like a Post-it note on my head and a newspaper clipping. This is how old I am. That was Maker's Mark was advertising for an event coordinator, and my mom was like, "Go get a job." Like, I'd come home for a wedding in between backpacking in Asia and different things. And to appease my mom, I was like, "Okay, I'll apply for this job." I dropped it off at the office, their small corporate office in Louisville. It was a week late. And my opening line, because you still wrote cover letters back then. I don't know if that's a thing still.
Yeah.
My opening line was, "I don't want this job." And I'm like, I would be the worst event coordinator ever. And Amanda can testify to that. I would be terrible. And I picked this job. I'm like, I've been traveling and I'm a Kentucky girl and I love, Maker's Mark. It was what my family drank. And Rob Samuels called, and he was like, "They passed me your resume, your letter. Would you like to come in and meet?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Like, what's happening now?" And so I went in and he hired me. He had just come back to Kentucky to work for his dad. His dad had made him go out and earn his stripes. And he had just come back and he was setting up a global kind of strategy for Maker's Mark. At that time, we were primarily only distributed in the US. And he said, "Do you want to come work for me? And we'll be the global department. And you're going to go out and train distributors and bartenders and talk to people about Maker's Mark." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds amazing. I'll do that." And I did. And that was just over 14 years ago. And I've had a lot of different jobs and worn a lot of different hats. But I was our global brand ambassador for 5 years. And then when the bourbon boom happened, I came home and I nagged. I'm a really good nagger. And my dream was to make whiskey. And then I always teased Denny, and then I learned what a distiller did. And I'm like, "Oh my God, I don't want to make the whiskey. I want to be the person that puts it in the bottle." That's, and blending and thinking up new whiskeys. And that's, I want to use my oversized nose every day. That was my middle school insecurity, right? That's, so I just nagged until finally Rob was like, "Okay, this is your job, go." So I've been doing innovation Since 2014, but in official capacity for about 2 years. It was my side hustle at Makers for a long time. So
So not only did you have a full-time job, you also had the side hustle.
I did private
yeah.
select. I literally did it on nights and weekends. That was a 2-year creation in my kitchen, basically, that I was still doing advocacy and commercial work, and that was a side gig.
Wow. Yeah. That's crazy. And now 14 years later, here you are as the director.
Still hanging around.
Yeah, that's awesome. Amanda, what about you? Let's talk a little bit about how you got into it and what you're doing now.
So funnily enough, actually, fittingly, it all ties back to Jane why I am in American whiskey. So when Jane was gallivanting around the world as a whiskey ambassador, I was managing bars in London. So I was managing a private members club called Paramount. It's closed down now. Tom Dixon design, absolutely beautiful place, 33 floors up.
Amazing.
And Jane would come in. Jane would come in as the Maker's Mark ambassador, and she did this training session for me and a couple, and some of my staff. And I hadn't felt that connection with a category and specifically a brand before. And I literally, from that moment on, I was just like, I want to work in American whiskey. This is really cool. I then started to, move slowly to the other side of the bar, looking after world whiskeys, the Japanese, Irish, Scotch, American. And then when the job as Maker's Mark Diplomat came up in the UK, not long after that, I grabbed it. And here I am, a couple of years later, living in Kentucky, based at the distillery in Loretta. It's mad how things work out.
It's wonderful how things work out.
Isn't it just?
Yeah, so that's really cool because obviously you all were friends, you knew each other, and
a long time.
So that's really cool that now you're working together. To me, Maker's Mark, when I think about Kentucky bourbon, I mean, that obviously is Kentucky bourbon. I mean, that's what I told Denny. I mean, to me, it's, as a kid, Maker's Mark is Kentucky bourbon when you think about it. You drive around Kentucky, you see the red wax. You don't even have to see the name Maker's Mark. I mean, you see the spindles on a billboard, or you see the spindles somewhere, and you instantly know that it's Maker's Mark, and it's just an iconic brand. So but that's really cool that you guys had been able to connect that way. And Jane,
she missed my wedding. She was.
I did. I was sick, and she never lets me live it down. Yeah. I do have the mini Maker's bottle, the Mr. and Mrs. Bowie, that was dipped in gold wax, still at home on my mantelpiece, though.
Oh.
She'll never let me live that down, guys.
You were like, I'm stuck in Paris. I'm so sorry. I'm like, you're a star.
Yeah. I'm sorry, but I'm stuck in Paris right now. I can't make it to
We got married. My husband's from England, so we got married. But we're so happy Amanda's stateside.
Yeah, I can see you guys getting in some trouble. I don't know why, but it conjures up images of you two together, wreaking havoc. Never. Well, I tell you what, let's talk a little bit more about the RC6. Matt, what do you get in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
The palate is very similar to the nose. It's very bright, very zesty. I don't know if playful is a great word to describe a palate, but it comes across that way. It's got the tangerine and the zestiness from the citrus comes across that I was getting, but it's got some sweetness and a little bit of backbone to it as well. There's some spice. There's a little bit of heat that comes as well with this. It's not all just like a lemonade or an aid sweet drink. It's got body. I like it.
Yeah, that's funny.
The oak shines through, and the wood is coming through with it as well.
Yeah, Matt, you're talking about having backbone, and when you drink a wheated bourbon, you think the creamy, rich, smooth, kind of sweeter profile. I think that's kind of the image that conjures up in your mind. And when you drink this one, I mean, this has a really spicy kick to it. And I think that may be a surprise to some people when they did it. So Jane, when you were mad scientists and all this on this RC6, was it something that you said, this is what I'm shooting for? Or was it like, this is where we're kind of headed and this is how this developed?
Yeah. So our approach to innovation, and we've not been doing this very long, right? I mean, 50 years of one thing, and then we kind of have dabbled along since then. But I think there's a couple of ways to innovate and a couple of different approaches. And here's what I would say. There's no right or wrong. So there's approach A, which is you throw shit against the wall and see what happens. My number one job description is I'm not allowed to do that. I want to all the time, but I'm not allowed. And it's kind of, okay, well, let's try this and we'll see what happens. And then, that is not the maker's way. When Bill and Margie started this brand in the 50s, they sat down and they defined success for them. Bill Jr. did the same with Maker's 46. So for us, these whiskeys, we start with what are we trying to make? Like, what is the taste vision? What are the flavors we're wanting to highlight? What if we can dream up what the whiskey tastes like in the bottle? Here's what it is. And Denny and Beth Buckner, who's our innovation manager, she came from quality, so she's more of a science background. Is that really loud? I'm really sorry.
No, I can't hear anything.
Okay. It's our old refrigerator. I'm in our whiskey room and like the beer fridge is making a noise. Sorry. So the three of us, right, we all like different things. We all have different favorites. So we spend a lot of time getting to an objective vocabulary, getting to a place where we agree on here's what winning looks like. Because if you just start down the road and it becomes what do I like, what do I think, we're never going to agree. And it's just going to become who's the alpha, which is probably me, but that's fine. It's what do we think? Where are we going? So this one was, if yeast is the inspiration, and that's what we want to celebrate is that yeast strain. What are the flavors? And it's not literal, right? Like when I tell you our yeast drinks like a Hefeweizen, this whiskey doesn't taste like a Hefeweizen. Right. It's more, what do we get? And we get banana bread, we get ripe fruit, like the fruit flies are getting ready to sit in. You know, Matt, you talked about that orange. And then you get these underlying clove notes. So it was, let's blow these things out of the water. And did we hit it perfectly? No. Were we really happy with how it turned out? Yeah. Like these are makers that they're expressions of makers people haven't seen before and don't expect. Right. So for us, like I guess for me, I always say like, you going, it's fine is the word. I would rather you hate it. Like they're meant to like make you feel something and have a point of view because that's how we design them.
So just going back to the process itself, and I think most of our listeners understand, but can you kind of just talk about the process of creating this in terms of how the staves are utilized and how you actually do that from the physical standpoint of actually doing that and how that works. Can you explain that?
Yeah. So one of our core things is we like agriculture, right? Amanda's going to talk about, we work on a 1,200 acre working farm. So we're using virgin oak. So we're making fully matured makers. So that makers that you guys know and love, hopefully, maybe not. We're making that, we're getting it to where, okay, everybody says, yep, it's makers. We're dumping that whiskey out of the barrel and we're holding it in a tank. We're then inserting these stave inserts that you're putting the wood in the middle of the barrel to put the whiskey back in to basically finishing. The whole role of finishing is you've already matured something and you're wanting to give it more flavor and more expression by adding something to it, whether it's those sherry butts where you're getting sherry impact, or, you look at our friends at Angel's Envy, they do a wonderful job with those port barrels. For us, we're using virgin oak that's cooked in different ways. And the goal is we want that fully matured whiskey to spend enough time with those virgin oak staves that have been cooked and we're putting into the fully matured product to give the whiskey a little something more. So with 46, it's French oak, and the goal is more vanilla, more caramel, more spice. With this RC6 stave, it was American oak that was cooked in a convection oven at different times and different temperatures to give some acidity with that fruit, but also to give some of those eugenols that you're getting those spice notes. Like we wanted those things. So the wood was cooked in a way to highlight those compounds in the oak that was going to give the makers a little something more. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, yeah, it makes perfect sense. I just wanted our listeners to kind of get an understanding. And I think most people, know or are familiar with the process, but I thought it might be good to give a refresher for everybody. So I tell you what, we're at the end of our first round. So let's get some final thoughts on the RC6. Matt, what do you think?
I thought it was an interesting and very telling way to start out the wood finishing series by celebrating the yeast. I like that. It seems like maybe like if I were in charge of this, like down the line when I ran out of ideas, I would be like, the yeast. Okay, we'll celebrate the yeast. But it's cool. It's unique and it's very telling that you start right off by saying we're going to do the wood finishing series and we're not going to focus 100% on telling you about all of the process and the maturation with our wood, but we're going to focus on the yeast, which is so much of the distillation process. And so I really like that. I didn't know that coming into this, that this was more of a celebration with the yeast. And I think the way that you use the virgin American oak to really chase out the different flavors and to bring that the boldness and the spiciness of the baking spices coming through on the end, just the vibrance of the citrus and the zesty fruitiness, it worked really well.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, that's Matt does a great job at that, and I can always just sit here after he says those things, and I just go, yep, everything that Matt just said, that's right. But I agree, and to me, because I haven't visited this one in a while, so when I go back and taste it, I'm just really shocked at how it comes across so spicy to me. Which I love, because if you gave this to me and I was tasting it, I would almost swear that it was like a rye whiskey or a high rye bourbon. I would not say, oh yeah, that's a maker's mark. You just wouldn't. So very, very unique, and I really enjoy that. So all right, well, let's take a quick break, get a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back in just a minute with more with Jane Bowie and Amanda Humphrey from Maker's Mark. Hey, Bourbon Lifers, when you're out hunting for those hard-to-find bottles or just enjoying the distilleries of Central Kentucky, you're going to work up an appetite. And when it's time to refuel, we suggest that you visit our good friends Rebecca and Eric Burnworth at the Stave Restaurant. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, close to Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, the Stave Restaurant is just off the beaten path, nestled on the banks of Glens Creek. With a newly redesigned menu, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day featuring an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. You can take our word for it. The food alone is worth the trip to the Stave. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. And you can even purchase bottles of bourbon to take home with you while you're there. Make sure to follow the Stave on Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky, or visit them online at thestavekentucky.com to stay up to date on everything that's going on. The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise, right here in the heart of bourbon country. All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me, as always, still here in the Bourbon Life Studios is my good friend, my toboggan-wearing buddy, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great, man. How are you doing? You have a good time on session 1?
Yeah, I did. And I'm, anytime I'm drinking bourbon with friends, I'm going to be happy. So
absolutely.
Today was just a long day, and you get in that mindset where you're like, oh my gosh, it's a long day, and I've got another podcast to do, and then you start drinking, you're talking with friends, and you're like, this is awesome. It's like, can't ask for anything more, So that turn that frown upside down. Bourbon has a way to do that for me. All right, Matt, enough of that, right? Let's jump back into what we're talking about here. So, Jane, I'm going to throw it back to you again real quick so you can tell everybody what we've got poured up on the second round here.
So this is our 2020 wood finishing release.
Wait, what's the name on that one, Jane?
It's the 2020 wood finishing release. It's SE4PR5, or 4x5, as people like to call it. I don't know who those people are. I might have just made that up. But yeah, so here's what I would say again. Okay, so year 1 was the taste inspiration. Year 2 was seasoning. So we air dry all of our wood outside for a year before it gets made into a barrel. And I'm going to give you a quick wood 101, okay? When you cut down a 100-year-old oak tree, there's about 65% moisture in that tree. To make it into a barrel, you need it to be around 12 to 14%, which is the same moisture rate as the corn. Just a little fun fact for you.
Oh.
And so you need it to be 12. So how do you get it there? What do you do? So what typically happens is they cut them into logs. They sit on a yard. They go into the stave mill. And then they might sit on the lot for 3 months before they go to a dryer for a 28-day cycle. And then they go to the kiln for another cycle. And then they go get made into a barrel. At Maker's Mark, we do not dry at all. We do not go into the dryer. We let Mother Nature dry for us for a year. As the maturation person, this is the number one thing I'm most proud of, and this is so geeky. But why we do this, there's a few reasons. It changes the actual chemistry of the oak. So it starts leaching out tannins and pulls a lot of those tannins out. And then it starts to break down the lignin and the hemicellulose to give you natural vanilla and natural caramel flavors. So we work really hard. There's 8 acres of Maker's Mark wood rotting on a lot in Lebanon, Kentucky, right down the road from us, because we want those flavors in the bourbon, right? That is something we really, really care about. And it's really gross. Like there's mushrooms growing on it, but it smells like cotton candy and marshmallows. It's amazing.
Huh.
So the goal of this whiskey was heavy vanilla, heavy caramel with light tannins. I don't know how you're going to add wood and get less tannins, but that was the goal. And so when we started this one, actually we kicked it off right when Denny came back and rejoined Makers, when he had his homecoming, his second tour of duty. And we're like, this is like bourbon for dummies, like vanilla and caramel, like, right? Every tasting you ever go to, if you're like, I get vanilla and caramel, everybody's like, you nailed it.
That's right.
Yeah, good job. So we're like, this is the Maker's Mark for dummies. Like, how easy is this going to be? I can make this in my sleep. We're idiots, right? We're idiots. So we start down this process, and the reason it's got the weirder name, we had to actually make 3 different bourbons and blend. So the thing about us, we talked about our innovation philosophy. We are really married to the taste vision. We are less married to the process, right? Like no one would have chosen to put inserts into a barrel with French oak that's 200 years old. Like the trees are growing for 200 years in the Vosges for it. Like no one would have chosen that. But we're really married to like, here's where we're going. So with this one, it was the first time we put our blending hats on, because vanilla and caramel, you cannot get both in major amounts out of the same piece of wood, because their degradation level on cooking is at different temperatures and times, and you need different processes. So the PR5 stave is American oak. We finished the whiskey for only 4 weeks in that stave, and we used approximately 55% of that whiskey. The SE4 stave was French oak. We actually did 1 batch for a 5-week finish and 1 batch for a 6-week finish. It went from creamy caramel to burnt caramel, and we wanted both for complexity. And we used about 32% of the creamy caramel and about 12 to 13% of the burnt caramel. And that was how we made this whiskey.
Wow. That's quite a process.
Yeah.
It was.
Holy smokes.
I mean, it was like karma, right? We're like, this will be easy. And then we're like, we're assholes. We're morons. This is so hard. So.
And it's obviously it's the standard Maker's, product that you start with, like everything else. And then you do the finishing on that. So Matt, what are you picking up on that?
Well, I think I have to say vanilla and caramel first and foremost. But
I get a slight taste of, let's see, vanilla, and then wait, there's a little caramel in there too. Yeah. What else, Matt?
I had pick up like a little bit of marshmallow coming through with it, and maybe, which is weird because I know this is a wheated bourbon and not a rye bourbon, but I pick up like some graham cracker, and might be coming across with the baking spices, but I don't pick out like any prominent baking spices like in the last batch where there was clove or there was cinnamon, but just some sort of like a baked graham cracker or whatever spices might go into like a sweeter baked cracker.
Nice.
Yeah, we get that a lot with that PR save. That American Oak graham cracker, absolutely. Sorry, Mark. I need to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say, I don't know why, but I almost detect a little bit of chocolate to me in this, which is I don't know if anybody else gets that or if I'm just making that up, Jane. So
You're on your own on that one.
I find chocolate and vanilla, my brain, it's like vanilla and caramel. Like when you eat and consume those things, they're often together. And so your brain puts them together.
Sure.
So vanilla is one I really struggle with, honestly. Where everything Denny smells is like vanilla. I'm like, I don't know. But I think they're closely connected. I think what's interesting about this one, the vanilla and caramel were easy. It was the tannin free. We wanted the whiskey not to have an astringent finish.
Yeah.
We wanted it to be more fat and viscous and heavy. And we finally got there. And it's amazing to me how much different oak, especially when French oak has 8.5 times more tannins than American oak. And 45% of this blend is French oak, right? That you don't get the astringent tannic finish in this.
Yeah.
This one has been a favorite. It drinks kind of like butter pecan ice cream. I don't like butter pecan ice cream, so I really struggled with this one, but that's why you have the taste vision, right? Like we're going here. This isn't what I would choose to drink personally. Denny loved it. His palate's like Buddy the Elf. So it was loved it. But
I know him. Yeah.
I'm with Denny on this one because usually Jane and I have completely different sort of palettes on this one as well. So when Jane's like, "Oh, this is one of my favorites," I tend to like the ones that she's, not as, not her favorites, not as big of a fan. So it's interesting.
So sure. What do you think about this one, Amanda?
So I get on this one, when you first crack into the top of like a caramel creme brulee, just that like first sort of taste that you get on that sort of skim. I get that all singing, all dancing.
Very nice. Yeah. So kind of a burnt sugar, but also, so it's a combination that you're talking about there, Jane, of like a burnt
creaminess.
Yeah. Kind of a burnt caramel, but then also like a cooked caramel or a creamy caramel as well. So that makes a lot of sense there for sure. So Amanda, let's talk a little bit or a lot of bit, whichever.
A lot of bit. Let's go.
Yeah. About the farm. We're talking about innovation and talk about innovation that you guys are doing there with whiskey and the bourbons. So let's talk about some of the farm stuff that's going on there, if you want to share with us.
So you've listened to, the care, attention, the passion that goes into the production process. And at the distillery, hopefully for those of you that haven't been down, you get to visit us soon. The reason why Margie and Bill set up the distillery in the 50s was A, because of the whiskey, and B, because hospitality. We wanted a place where people, friends, family could come and visit us and see what we're doing. There was no such sort of thing as bourbon tourism before Margie started in the 50s. And, she's really pioneering with that. So Jane, Denny, and the team have created this incredible whiskey. How do we as the hospitality department at the distillery work to elevate it, to complement it? And the way that we're doing that is we're utilizing, Jane mentioned that we sit in 1,200 acres at Makers as a working farm. And the small part of that is the main campus where the distillery sits. But actually, we've got over 1,000 acres that sit just to the back of our 10-acre spring-fed lake where we pull from production. So when we're talking about all this exciting stuff we're doing at the distillery, we're really building on Bill and Margie's vision for A, that flavor profile, and B, that hospitality element of it. And we're doing that through experiences and through culinary and cocktails. So we don't just want to be a distillery, but we want you to be able to come down, sip on Makers while you're enjoying incredible food, while you're looking at sculpture, glass art, to be an immersive experience when you come down that all ties back into the whiskey. So some of the things we've been working on, we've got Star Hill Provisions that sits at the heart of campus. What we're doing is that we're sourcing actually most of the ingredients from Star Hill Farm. So either growing it ourselves, foraging it, or sourcing, just like we source our wheat from within a 30-mile radius of the distillery. We source our corn from within a 60-mile radius. We want to do the same with our produce that we're serving, in cocktails and culinary across site. So we're working on production gardens. So we've got a 2-acre production garden that our environmental farm manager, Jason Nally, tends to. So we're just getting started on this 2021 sort of like growing season now, which we're super excited about. So we've got that it's a couple of miles up the road from main campus where we've got that. We're growing watermelons, squash, zucchinis, beans, we're growing all sorts of stuff, pumpkins. And we're basically testing seeds and varietals so to see what best grows in the soil climate in Loretto and that surrounding area, just like we do with our corn and our wheat. So everything is tying back to that pursuit of flavor that we're after. How can we elevate like simple ingredients at the restaurant just from like knowing, from seed to sip or seed to fork, we know where it's come from. We've controlled the quality of the soil and everything going into it. So it's an absolute journey for us at the moment. As well as that production garden, Rob Samuels has got this incredible vision for the distillery, and we are building an innovation garden that's going to sit just to the side of the visitor center. Now, I don't know if you guys have heard of Dan Barber.
Doesn't ring
Have
a
you
bell.
watched Chef's Table? So he's got an episode on there from Bluestone Barns in New York. So he's got a restaurant in New York City, and then in upstate New York where he has his barn and he like grows the produce. He also has a seed company called Seven Row. So growing for flavor as well as, yield. Over time, we've just been like farming for yield over flavor. So like going back to like where it started for like flavor purposes and what grows best in certain soil climates. So we're actually partnering with Dan Barber in this innovation garden to bring different varietals of fruits, vegetables to Loretto to see what best grows in that climate to create our own varietals specific to us. And then, you're going to be like, Amanda, you need to shut up soon. But just a few other bits. So we've got an apiary. So we've got bees that pollinate
on the
wildflowers and, the sunflowers in the production garden. So one of our cocktails is the Gold Rush. And if you like your whiskey sours, guys, try this. It's literally 3/4 honey, 3/4 lemon, and then 2 parts makers. And it really just lets the sort of natural ingredients sing out in that product. And 2 out of those 3 ingredients are from the distillery, and there's really something quite special in that. We use like different parts. So the beeswax itself, we use to age Manhattans and old fashions. So every part of the process is used. We sit on the former Burke's Distillery in Gristmill. So actually the old original limestone quarry from there, we've turned into a mushroom garden. So we've inoculated 150 shiitake logs, 5 different styles of shiitake. So fall of this year, you'll be able to come and enjoy a mushroom cocktail or escarvent while sipping on bourbon just in that old limestone quarry. It's going to be absolutely stunning. So we're working on lots of different bits, and we're on this journey, like Jane's on the journey with the whiskey with the team, and we're on this journey in the pursuit of flavor to complement that. And we're in Kentucky because the soil, because the water, so how do we best leverage that to bring it across into culinary cocktails?
That's really amazing. I had no idea that you guys were doing all of that. I mean, no idea.
And I didn't even mention the Wagyu Cattle, which hopefully, so invite you all to the distillery when everything starts to open up, and you'll be dining on Maker's Mark Star Hill Farm Wagyu Cattle. So we had 22 cows that we put on the back pastures just to the back of the lake at the back of the property. And they are grass-fed and syrup-fed from stillage. And then they're finished on the last 30 days. They're finished on grain. So we are in the pursuit of flavor, not just with our whiskey, but our meat, our steaks to complement the whiskey.
From the vegetarian.
Right, okay, Jane. So I'm a vegetarian because I love the taste of meat. So it's got traceability. So I'm going to be
vegetarian in the world. But I gotta say, what we do, like Amanda has been a game changer, and she will not, I'm going to brag on her for she's not just one of my best girlfriends, and selfishly I wanted her to live in Kentucky, but what she's bringing to cocktails, because at the end of the day, we work really hard to get the whiskey in the bottle, And then watching bartenders transform it into something else is really magical at the end of the day, right?
Yeah.
Taking something that you've worked to get there and then seeing their expression of it and how they bring it to life in a different way. And Amanda's cocktail program, and we're starting at the distillery on Star Hill Farm, but she's working to kind of take that out as well. And the beeswax, I mean, the things she comes up with, you're like, what? Right? And
Leslie Krockenberger, who is the head bartender at Star Hill Provisions, like we just work incredibly well together with profiles and Jane creates liquid, like we break that down. What flavors can we grow and bring from the distillery and from surrounding areas to and we don't have it's different at the distillery. We don't have a back bar full of like liqueurs and different syrups and rums and vodkas and stuff. So how do we create this diverse cocktail menu just by using a couple of ingredients with Maker's Mark? And that's really the way we're going about it. And it's not just what we're doing at the distillery, as Jane mentioned, it's how we take learnings from our growing, from the cocktails, and like how we then like educate and then take that out into the community is a huge piece for us as well, both environmental impact wise. So we want to be one of the greenest distilleries in the world in the next couple of years, and it's a big feat. And we're trying to get better day on day with everything that we're doing there. We've got a sustainability sort of team that get together, and me and Jane are part of it. How do we become better? Is the technology there to change things? So we've got a solar powered array that offsets all the electricity used to power all of our rick houses. So the lighting, the break rooms, the security lights, the lifts. How do we start to improve and make things better? Down at the restaurant, we've got composting, a glass to sand machine where you can crush a bottle of Maker's Mark down in like 3 to 5 seconds into fine sand you can run through your fingers that we can then reuse and turn into glass for the next cocktail menu. So it's like how we take all of this and how we just sort of learn from each other with it, I think is a huge thing for us at Maker's.
Sorry, we talk a lot.
Sorry, I go on and on.
That's quite all right. No, it's so awesome because, we talked about at the very beginning about innovation and, obviously innovation, not only in the bourbon, but innovation at the farm and what you're doing, looking to the future and the sustainability, and, the green transfer, getting to a more green type of distillery operation. I mean, that's just pretty amazing. It really is. And it's things like that obviously we all need to be thinking about as we move forward in the future, how we can have less of an impact on our environment and how we can do things to help our.
And Mark, I won't even get into like Denny and like the team, wastewater management, like it's the sexy talk within this, and we won't even get into that now. So we'll just move on.
Wastewater management is Denny Potter's true love.
He loves
it. He loves talking about waste. Yeah.
But now
Didn't he want to be a marine biologist?
Chemical, yeah, a marine biologist.
A marine biologist that went to Indiana University, the landlocked state. So, I mean, I don't know if we should question his intelligence from that. But here's what I'll say about Denny Potter. I mean, he's a very realistic distiller because at the end of the day, 91% of what we produce is waste, right?
Right.
I mean, that's what I always tease him. I'm like, you're not a distiller. You make cattle feed for a living. Like, let's be honest about what you do. The fact that he is probably one of the industry's best in wastewater management makes him, just head and shoulders, right? Because at the end of the day, the distillery is the easy part. The byproduct is the hard part. And that's what a lot of people, it's not the sexy part. Amanda's trying to make it the sexy part with the cattle feed and that feels good and all that stuff. But he's truly passionate about, we used to have an anaerobic digester, and I'm not even going to go into it. We were but that's what makes him such a good distiller at the end of the day.
Yeah. Well, we really enjoyed having him on the show last year. Now, if we start making fun of him for being a marine biologist from Indiana, he may never come back on the show. So we've got to watch.
frogs are sea life. Yes. It's
I swear Denny and Jane need their own show. I'd watch it. It's hilarious.
We'll have to work on that.
a
So
lot of banter. Yeah.
let's talk a little bit more about the whiskey in terms of the profile and the finish. Matt, what do you think on that?
Oh, I completely forgot about it. I'm sitting here listening to Amanda talk about the farm and the gardens, and the chef inside
I know Matt's
of
in
me
heaven. He's like,
is like,
yeah.
Salivating.
my cooking background is like totally taking all of that and running wild. I'm thinking about recipes and thinking about food and cooking now. But back to the whiskey. I think, Jane, you hit it right on with the butter pecan.
You're so nice.
It's I once you said that, it tied up.
I know, power suggestion.
but
right?
it tied up some loose ends of what I couldn't put my finger on, and it does have that butter pecan flavor aside of the vanilla and the caramel really heavy in there as well. But it's got that nice like creamy, fatty mouth feel to it as well that you would get from butter pecan ice cream.
Yeah, I never would have thought that. I mean, I just, Jane talking earlier, and when I say, oh yeah, I smell vanilla or taste vanilla, I mean, I'm serious because I'm that guy. That's why Matt is here, because Matt has Matt's got the palate to pick out those flavors. But as soon as you said that, it was like, oh yeah, I see what I completely see that. So now that's all that's in my mind. And so all this talking about steaks and Wagyu beef and shiitake mushrooms and ice cream, and now I'm kind of hungry. But now I did get to go down and have a lunch at Star Hill a few months ago. Well, I guess it was a while back, and actually got to see Amanda while we were down there, which was fun. It was kind of a surprise.
Yeah, you didn't tell me you were coming down there, and you just rock up, and I'm like, that looks like Mark. It is.
We didn't know it was. We went to another distillery close to there to pick up some bottles for a podcast, and as we were leaving, Anita and I were just talking, and we're like, hey, we're pretty close to Makers. We should just run over there real quick. So we did, and then we're like, well, hey, we should probably eat while we're here. So so that was fun to get to run into you. But the food was it was amazing. Yeah, it really was. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. So looking forward to the opportunity to come back down there and have another round.
Yeah, we can't wait to have you all back down. We've been sort of ticking along with tours and reduced capacities and sticking to guidelines with it, and it's felt super safe down there. But Jane will attest to this. We're used to just this energy down there, this hustle and bustle of everyone down at the distillery, and looking forward to it opening back up again to get that energy and get you guys back down there.
Yeah. We miss the people for sure.
Yeah, I'm sure. And that'll be a lot of fun to be able to do that. Well, we're actually at the end of round 2 here. So final thoughts, Matt, on the 2020 release. I'm not even gonna try to remember the numbers. And the 4x5.
Oh, it's great. A good marriage of the 2 oaks in there, the Virgin American and also the French oak. Fun to see the different flavor profiles come out in those. And Jane, to what you were saying about how do you add more oak and more flavor and less tannin, I think you did a very great job with it.
Thanks, Matt.
Yeah, definitely, because I am not a big fan of tannic finishes. When I take a drink and my mouth kind of puckers up, or I need a drink of water, I'll be the first to say, yeah, not a big fan, but totally not in this expression at all. So very, very funny that you said that the French oak has such a higher content, but you're able to work around that through the process, and that's pretty amazing. Definitely. All right, so let's get a word from our other sponsor. We'll take a quick break, and we'll be back with more with Jane Bowie and Amanda Humphrey from Maker's Mark in just a minute.
Hey, Bourbon Lifers. We want to take just a second and tell you a little bit about 3 Chord Whiskey. 3 Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call perfectly tuned taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them all together. After each blend is completed, the 3 Chord team then applies their proprietary process of pyrolysis, that's a lot to say, isn't it? Which involves heating American oak to precise temperatures to release specific flavor and aroma compounds. Then they use another proprietary method called rhythmic disruption process, and that's more than just playing music to a bunch of barrels, which integrates all of those related compounds into the blended spirit. Finally, each small batch blend of 3 Chord is evaluated by a trained sensory panel to ensure an uncommon depth of flavor, character, aroma, and a perfectly tuned taste in each bottle. With their introductory blended bourbon, their Amplify Rye, Strange Collaboration, which is a Pinot Noir finished Kentucky bourbon, their 94 rated 12 bar reserve, and the brand new highly coveted 15-year Kentucky bourbon they call the Whiskey Drummer, there's a lot of options available from 3 Chord. Like the feeling you get when you hear that perfect song, you'll know that the 3 Chord line of whiskeys are right from the first sip. They resonate with so much flavor, you'll want an encore. Find out more about 3 Chord whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final period, Matt. See, I got it right this time. A hockey game, not a hockey match. We're in the third period, the third 20 minutes, man. We're going to wind it down here, right? So, but thank you all for hanging out with us. And I'm here with my good friend in the Bourbon Life Studios, Matt. Matt, how you doing over there?
Oh, Mark, I'm doing great, man. Having a really great time. How about yourself?
I really, it's funny how bourbon just does that for you, when I talked about that earlier, but just my mood has changed dramatically. It could be the company. I think that's what it is. It's the company, not necessarily the bourbon.
It has to be the company.
Yeah.
So the bourbon, of course, but it's, as we always say, it's all about who's around the bottle, not what's in it.
Oh, yeah. That's good, Matt.
Matt, you're a smooth talker.
Is he not?
Yes.
I mean, honestly, like, come on, gosh, you don't even need me. See, that was our joke before. We didn't need Mark on the Bourbon Life anymore. It's just going to be Matt and our guests, and they're just going to do their own thing. It's like, okay, you guys have fun. I'll see you later.
Oh, we'd be nothing without you.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
No way, Mark.
All right. So let's jump back in, and we're going to finish out on our third and final expression. Jane, I'll throw it back to you. If you want to tell everybody what we've got poured up for this round.
All right. So 2021. Sorry, we just did 2020.
We should skip a year anyway. 2020. Oh.
Yeah, let's just skip that year, right? Yeah.
You know what? I'm going to not comment. So 2021, this was an interesting one. And if you thought the last 2 years were geeky, we got really just talking to ourselves a little bit on this one. FE stands for fatty acid esters, right? Everybody loves them if you're a whiskey person. And we wanted to celebrate some of our more technical processes as a taste inspiration. At the end of the day, we don't chill filter. We never have. We want to leave all the fat right there in the whiskey. And then we're going to ship about 2.5 million cases of Maker's Mark this year. And we still make every single drop of that 25 barrels at a time on a 36-inch column still with 16 plates and 1 rectifying section. And this is really geeky. We want those heavier congeners making it over the still. We distill to a low proof at 130. We go into the barrel at a low proof at 110. Yep. And so this year, it really was about things we love and respect about our own whiskey. And fatty acid esters, how hard we work to get them there in the fermentation and how hard we work to highlight them in distillation and keep them in by not chill filtering. So when we started this project about 18 months ago, texture, right? When we talk about taste, it's not just flavor. People confuse taste and flavor. And to me, they're two different things. Taste encompasses flavor, it encompasses texture or body, and it encompasses finish. Because think about it, when you eat and drink, it's not just about what does it taste like, right? Mushrooms, Amanda, you talked about mushrooms in the last segment. Some people love mushrooms for how they taste. Other people go, oh, I can't stand the texture, right?
Right.
Same thing with like whiskey sours. I love an egg white whiskey sour. I'm the girl that would put heavy cream in my cereal every day. Like I love fat, viscosity, like put it in there. So we started thinking about all of this, and the original taste goal was texture. Let's go texture. But then when we started talking about the flavor, there was a lot. And so we actually said, we're going to make 2 whiskeys this year because there's too much that this contributes. There's too many conflicting things. So the first release was all about flavor. The second release this fall is all about texture and body. So this first one, the goal was fruit, but not like RC6 fruit. It was darker, heavier, dried fruit. And it was about some of the things you get in a warehouse when you walk through. So danky, heavy notes, and danky in the old sense of like my grandma's basement. Our old
Not like it's dank, yo.
I didn't know. I'm not cool or trendy. I am a grandma. I'm a 40-year-old grandma, basically. I did not know that was a thing. But this first one was all about heavy fruit, tobacco, like those notes. And then this fall, look out because it's all about texture and viscosity.
Very nice. And Amanda, I know you're not drinking this one with us, so I won't ask you what you're picking up. So I'll go to Matt.
I can tell you still though, because
I
tried it yesterday and the day before that. So
and
I was
the day before that,
firm in there. But I get like leathery notes coming through on it, like these beautiful sort of leather notes that come through, as well as that sort of tobacco note Jane was talking about.
Matt, what are you picking up over there? You're working that glass pretty hard, I see, man. So
I know I'm going to lose my nostrils in this thing. I pick up the leather and the tobacco are definitely there. It's a nice pipe tobacco that I pick up, but the stone fruit, the dark, like juicy fruits that I pick up, like dark berries, plum, fig, like a really dark grapes that might come out of wine, like a touch of currant as well, like very reminiscent of like red wine flavor and really dark stone fruit coming through.
I get vanilla and caramel.
Take the notes. You're not wrong,
Mark.
Nailed it,
and
man.
everything that Matt said. Oh, so Jane, real quick, let's go back. I was going to ask this in the first round because Maker's Mark started in the 50s, and for 60 years it was Maker's Mark. And it was Maker's Mark, and it was, Maker's Mark, which there's nothing wrong with that. But then I know, when we talked to Denny last year, that Bill wanted to do something a little unique and started working on the 46 project, I guess. So how has that been to take a brand that has been 60 years of the same thing, which is a great product, but then all of a sudden here you are in, the last 10 years or so that it's a totally different mindset. Yeah. So how has that played out?
I think there's a few dynamics. So first of all, I think at the end of the day, Bill and Margie were pioneers, right? I mean, Maker's was really innovative for the 50s. Right. When you think about their approach and what they did and how they did it. So a lot of it's capturing their spirit. And thinking about today's climate and the bourbon landscape, the American whiskey landscape, right? I've been with Maker's 14 years. Holy cow, has a lot changed in those 14 years. So I think what's great is people want this. And we've been a very consumer-led brand from the very beginning. We've listened to consumers. We've listened to what they want, what they don't want. So those 60 years, Mark, it was just, don't screw it up. Because this is what people wanted. And bourbon, we didn't have what we have today. Internally, I'm the least popular person at our distillery.
Amanda's agreeing with you. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm not. I always am like, I'm not winning the Maker's Mark homecoming queen. Like, it's not happening.
Only because you wouldn't turn up.
I wouldn't. But we are a town of 700 people. And we employ the town like that. And it is multi-generational people. And so the guardianship of this brand, we get asked all the time, like, why are we doing this? Like, why are you doing this? Like, what? And I think it's that balance. So, I'm the first person to have this job at Maker's Mark. Like, we didn't innovate. That wasn't a thing. And I think at the end of the day, like, it's where the industry's going, and we're doing it our way, and we're really proud of how we're doing it. And it's different. It's hard to understand. This whiskey is funky. I love this FAE. It's real funky. It's different. But people might not understand or always love it. But, you know, at the end of the day, like, it's exciting and it's fun to engage with people like you all on what we're doing. So,
Well, we appreciate that very much. So out of these three, now I know because they're like your kids, right? I mean, you work on them, you develop them, you create them, you nurture them, you love them. So can you say you have a favorite, or can you say there's one that you're more partial toward, possibly?
they are like my children, and I drink based on seasons and occasions and reasons. RC6, you know, it was the first, and it was 2 years of wanting to do something different and wanting to show the public something different from this storied brand. So I have a lot of sentimental feelings about it.
Sure.
From a taste, honestly, the FAE is probably leans to my palate. It's fruity and funky, and I love that. So for me, like, but I am in the minority. Everyone else, 2020. Like, everybody else is 2020. That's just, I don't have a sweet palate. So for me, it's not my favorite.
Yeah. Yeah. You're not just the caramel and vanilla type, right?
I like it.
Yeah.
They're all
Yeah.
beautiful whiskeys, but it's not my favorite. Yeah.
So I'm just curious, years ago, either one of you, did you ever imagine yourselves being where you are now?
No.
Never. Amanda? What about you, Amanda? I mean, did you ever envision that, hey, I'm going to be living in the States working for one of the best whiskey brands, bourbon brands in the world?
Yes.
Nah.
I don't know, when I put my mind to something, honestly, I went on this American whiskey journey, and what's next, when I look at, like, what I'm doing is like, what's next? And like, what's next has always been, I want to move to Kentucky and I want to work at the distillery. So yeah, I mean,
with bartending, Amanda, like, how long have you been in that world?
it's like bartending BC, so before cranberry juice, before we had all this amazing stuff out there. But yeah, I think it's been 8 years since I was on, like, bartending and bar managing from that side of the bar. But I love that, and that's what I love about being back down at the distillery, actually, is like having a foot in the restaurant with the coloring and the cocktails, and like, it's that energy of service. And everyone that comes down to Makers, it's like they're on this sort of like holiday or this sort of pilgrimage, and everyone's in this incredible mood. And yeah, it's an incredible office to have, for sure.
Oh yeah, I can't imagine. It sure beats the hell out of my office.
But we've been working on experiences. So we've got the tour experiences that have been going on at Maker's Mark. But how do we start to play in those like 1,200 acres that we talked about? So we've actually been busy behind the scenes working on experiences for you folk that come down to the distillery. And if you've been on the sort of standard or elevated Maker's Mark tour, then there's plenty of other stuff for you to do when you come down. So we've got the Made at Makers workshops, where different workshops, they're all tied back to cocktails and the liquid, but you'll be making different things in different parts of nature, on the nature trails, cheersing under our genome tree. After you pull cask strength from a barrel in one of the oldest rick houses. We've got, the flavor of art underneath the Chihuly, where we go through all the key pillars of Makers and how it ties into flavor paints and cocktails. You could come down, like, with plate and palette, we've got all this different stuff going on down there. So, we want, for the people that have already been to Makers, to come back and visit, and we've got loads of other incredible things going on, that really utilize all these different incredible areas that we have across campus.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great experience. I mean, all the experiences, and that's something definitely, Matt, we need to make a trip down to Makers. But being from Eastern Kentucky, I'm going to throw out one experience now that you got the cattle on the property. Maybe you could do a nighttime cow tipping experience, where you take people out and feed them a few rounds of Makers, and then say, okay, pick your cow, And you know what cow tipping is, right, Amanda? Are you?
Yeah, I thought that was only a thing in England, but I didn't realize you Americans do it as well. But yeah, basically, for those of you that don't know, you wait until cows sleep standing up and then you just tip them over, which I fully don't condone
Right.
as a vegetarian, Jane.
There you go. There
I
you go.
don't think our legal department would approve of that. It's not compliant.
Mark, we're not feeding you bourbon and letting you near the cows at night, that's for sure, right?
There you go. Yeah.
You know what's funny is one of our maintenance, like Bradley, who runs our bottling maintenance, actually raises the cattle. It's basically like a farmer's market. Like I get my eggs from Brian Mattingly. Everyone that works at the distillery are also part-time farmers.
Oh, wow.
So everybody brings produce or eggs or whatever it is going. But our one of our maintenance employees, he's amazing, actually manages all of the cattle on site.
So he probably wouldn't appreciate me coming down and trying to.
He would not, Mark.
Well, okay. Here's a little.
We're gonna up security over the next couple.
Yeah,
of
no,
weeks.
it's like watch out for the big dude. He's coming down. So, all right. So here's a funny little question I like to ask people. What do you remember, or do you remember the first bourbon, or what was the bourbon that maybe got you in to drinking bourbon? So Amanda's like, no, I'm not going to answer that. No. What do you say, Amanda?
I've got a story for you ready to go.
Awesome. Go ahead. Let's hear it.
I think got me into bourbon's probably the wrong thing. The first time I had a sip of American whiskey was actually, probably shouldn't be talking about that. We won't talk about that time when I used to, sneak the bottle of, Tennessee whiskey from the shelf and fill up a little bit of water later.
Nothing wrong with Jackie.
If you look so in quality control at the distillery, usually someone sends a bottle in and they're like, there's something wrong with this bottle. The first question we usually ask is, do you have children at home? Because I was that child who would slowly water that bottle down until my dad was like, what the fuck is this?
What's wrong with my whiskey?
That's funny you say that, Amanda, because my parents to this day might still have a couple bottles of vodka that are actually all just water still sitting in their liquor cabinet.
Then actually, it's cheesy as hell, but my first sip of American whiskey was Maker's Mark, and my dad used to be a drinker of a different brand, and as soon as I started fully working on Makers, I was like, right, you need to pack this in, Dad, and we need to talk about your bourbon drinking. And now he'll send me pictures of himself all proud, look what I'm drinking. It'll be like a Maker's Old Fashioned. I'm like, that's my boy.
Oh, that's awesome. What about you, Jane? What was your first? Do you remember?
My first bourbon was Wild Turkey 101.
Oh, yeah. We just had Eddie on the show, as a matter of fact.
I loved it.
Yeah.
I still have such a special, it's one of my favorite brands. I love, and it's totally different from Makers. It could not be more different, right?
Right.
A lot of similar philosophies, low distillation proof, a lot of their processes, heavier fusel oils, char levels different. And then I drank bourbon all through college. I was in a sorority, and when times were good, we drank Jim Beam. When times were bad, that was. But I think what got me into bourbon, I moved to Japan right out of college and taught English in Japan for 2 years. Oh. And I was making money. It's so weird, right? The Kentucky girl in Japan. And they had the bourbon you got in Japan was mind-boggling. Blanton's Gold, Blanton's Silver. You got all these weird. I didn't even know Four Roses, right? That wasn't a brand in the U.S.
Right.
Four Roses didn't come back to the U.S. until when? The 2000s?
Early 2000s, that's right.
So, and then don't even talk about the early 90s, Makers Black Label over there.
I mean, it was all there, and I was making money, and I was a Kentucky girl, and suddenly these bourbons, and living in Japan is where I fell in love with bourbon.
That's funny. I mean, it's kind of funny, but that's great.
It's ironic, yeah. But I suddenly, in college, we drank it more. I mean, you went to school in Lexington, Mark. Right? it's part of tailgating. It's part of like
Right.
your social life in college. But I really started drinking it in Japan, and I really started becoming discerning about it and fell in love with it during those 2 years right after college, which is interesting. So, but Wild Turkey 101, I still forever will love.
Yeah, we actually drank some of that with Eddie on the show. It's really unique. I mean, it really is, and it's a great bourbon.
So good.
And I think sometimes it doesn't get the respect maybe that I think it deserves. So, but yeah, definitely a solid. Go ahead, Jane.
No, Denny and I talk about this all the time, right? Wild Turkey's been around since what? 40s, 50s, like
I think the
just like
30s, right,
Maker's.
Matt? Did he say the 30s? They were making it back in or I guess that's when they first started.
Yeah, I thought for some reason 1941.
Okay, there you go.
Stands out in
Gotcha.
my mind.
It's a similar. I mean, Denny and I talk about it all the time, right? People have all this heart for reviving these old brands, but people don't always appreciate how hard it is to keep a brand alive for that long.
Sure.
And you look at Jimmy and Eddie and what they've done at Wild Turkey and various owners through the years, and like that should be commended, right? Like you've kept this brand alive and it's beloved, and people, it's revered in Kentucky, and same with Makers. 70 years we've kept this. I don't want to revive it. I just want to keep it healthy and keep going. So
get really emotional about this.
No, it is. And I think we feel a lot of kindredness with Wild Turkey because there's a lot of similarities, sure. I think. So
no, that makes a lot of sense. It definitely does. So let's get back and talk a little bit more about the 2021 release. Matt, what are you picking up in terms of the palate when we finish?
I pick up a lot of the stone fruits coming through, but I really get a nice palate of I get raspberries, like really a nice juicy, bold raspberry. Again, like the currant is coming across, and like a spicy type note. I think of the three that we've had, this is my favorite flavor wise.
What? He's just brown nosing, Jane. Come on now.
No, I truly do.
Now, and it surprises me. This one actually has a little bit of that spiciness as well. Kind of like that RC6. So it's a little surprising to me. Again, I just, I don't think of and I know it's got the finishing with the staves that's going to impact that. But I just think in your mind, when you think Maker's Mark, you think of wheat, you think of creamy, smooth, you don't think of that spiciness. So that's one thing. And I love that. So that's a big plus for me. I get a little, almost like a brown sugary kind of flavor as well on the palate for me. The sweetness comes across as kind of a brown sugar. So definitely like this. So we're getting close to the end, but before we wrap everything up, I'm just kind of curious. So each of you, where do you all envision yourselves and the brand over the next 5-10 years or so? Can we do that? Can we ask that question? All right. Who wants to go first? Who wants to go first?
I don't know. I'll go first. I hope now, like this point in the Maker's Mark history, we're building on, that founder's vision. There's super exciting things going on across the distillery. The vision that Rob has, being a culturally rich place of whiskey, culinary, cocktails, arts, nature, like everything. I think we're just building an incredibly exciting future and something that we can't wait to share with all of you.
Very nice. Jane, how about you?
I think everyone should stay tuned. We're going to surprise you.
Yes.
Oh.
I mean, the thing with whiskey, it's not fast, right? I mean, I sat in meetings and we plan decades and centuries in this industry. And so I would say in the next 5 to 10 years, pay attention. Maker's Mark is going to surprise you and delight you. Like it's coming. For me, I have no idea. I would never have dreamed I would have been with this company or one job for 14 years. It's been good to me and I've loved it. And I hope I'm still here doing something, disrupting, nagging Denny, getting on his nerves. I don't know. We'll see.
You'll always be disrupting for sure.
But I would say for Maker's Mark, pay attention. It's coming.
Okay.
Cliffhanger.
Yeah.
We'll leave it on that cliffhanger.
That's really interesting. So so we got the second release of this one coming up later this year. So it'll be the FAE 02.
Yep.
And then each year you're going to continue, I'm assuming, these wood finishing series.
We've at least till next year. We are in the midst of 2022. Totally different concept. And I think we'll keep experimenting and sharing things. I don't know that it'll, like I said, last year was blending. This year, I didn't even talk. This year, the FAE 01, half the stave was raw. Like, who uses raw oak in whiskey? And we did something really different to get the flavor we were going after. You can taste it, right? You can get that raw fruitiness. But yeah, there will be more coming from that space. The fall release, if you like 2020, the fall release is going to be more in your wheelhouse. So Mark, if that was your jam,
that was my jam.
You're going to really like this fall release. It leans more in that camp, I think.
Awesome. That'll be exciting. Looking forward to that one. So where can everybody find you guys and your products and everything? So you guys.
Makersmark.com. I have no idea.
Everything is literally on makersmark.com. Like the events, the menus, the whiskey, the stories.
At Makersmark. And Amanda, social media. I don't know social media.
So actually, can we use this as a little nudge for Jane? Because I'm trying to get her into social media. So can everybody go and follow her on Instagram?
Yeah. Follow Jane on it. I think I followed Jane.
Bowie.
Yeah.
I posted
get her to do more. She is up to exciting shit all the time. And I'm like constantly like, Jane, you need to let everybody know what you're doing.
Let everybody know. That's right. You would have thousands and thousands and thousands of followers in no time, Jane.
You're not selling me out, Mark.
You could be like Amanda. Amanda is on Instagram as well. We're buddies on there.
So good on Instagram.
Yeah.
Whiskey Sister No E. Do you see what I did there?
I know. Isn't that crazy? I know. It was like a premonition that she was Whiskey Sister with no E before. You weren't with Makers when you set that up, were you?
No. That's right. It was. Thankfully, when I joined Makers, I didn't have to change it because somebody else in Canada's already got the whiskey with the Whiskey Sister spell. But yeah, on a final note, I can't wait to welcome you all down to the distilleries, so you can taste and see what we've been talking about over the last sort of hour and 20 minutes. Looking forward to it. Yeah,
definitely looking forward to that. If you've not been down there, you definitely need to make a trip down to Loretta and check them out. And you guys are you doing any tours at all right now? We've
got tours. They're just reduced numbers, but we have tours Wednesday through Sunday. So just, hop online. You can have a little look.
Okay. And the rest,
nice because you get smaller groups.
And the rest,
smaller groups, more like time in the warehouse. We've pivoted and actually it's a new experience and it's still just as cool, which is awesome.
We're calling it Maker's Mark Unplugged, right? So it's it's a smaller venue like MTV Unplugged. There you go. So
Maker's Mark is the acoustic version.
I know. There's people out there listening going, Unplugged. What are you talking? What are you talking?
Just Maker's Mark the acoustic version, right?
All right. So wrapping it up on this one, I like this one. I will say that I liked the 2020 release just because vanilla and caramel. So
it's 2-2 because I'm with you on that one, Mark.
All right. Thank you, Amanda. I appreciate that. So before we wrap it up, anything else you all want to add? You've got an open floor, so have at it.
Just thank the two of you. This has been so much fun, and our industry, survives and thrives because of people like the two of you and all your listeners. And it's amazing to us that people are interested and want to hear these stories. So thank you guys for having a platform for us to share everything we're doing. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. Amanda, anything you want to add before we get out of here?
I think the same thing. I'm proud to work for a category of spirit that, it's that sort of family, camaraderie going on with it. And it's been really interesting to see, Mark, you grow with Bourbon Life over the last couple of years. I've loved watching you and seeing what you've been up to, especially with the sort of podcast that you started over the last year or so. But yeah, I'm just super proud to be part of such an incredible category, and a brand. So I don't know, I'm where I belong, which is definitely American whiskey. So I'll finish on that.
Very, very nice. Yeah. Cheers to. Oh, look, I do actually still have just a teeny tiny bit in my glass. That's rare for me because usually it's gone pretty quick. Matt, before we wrap it up, buddy, anything you want to add?
Amanda and Jane, thank you both so much for taking the time to sit down with us and go through your role at Maker's Mark and where you've been in the past, where you are the present, and what we should be expecting in the future. This has truly been a delightful evening and a great conversation with both of you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, everything Matt said plus caramel and vanilla. How's that?
Crescendo.
No, we really appreciate it. And I know it took us some time to work all this out. So thank you all for your patience and persistence to do this with us. And I look forward to getting to see you both again in person, hopefully sometime soon. We'll make that trip down there. So that'll be a lot of fun. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I'm going to thank our sponsors first, the Stave Restaurant again, out there on McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, right between Castle Key and Woodford Reserve. So check those guys out online, thestavekentucky.com. Just doing some really good stuff out there. And then also 3 Chord Bourbon. We appreciate their support as well. So check them out online at 3chordbourbon.com. And with that said, I'm going to wrap it up. Send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full and may you keep on living the bourbon life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the bourbon life.